Hello, everyone. My name is Srikanth Venkat. I head product management for Privacera, which is a data governance and security player in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. Prior to my role at Privacera, I was at Cloudera, managing their SDX portfolio, which is comprised of a variety of security and governance solutions and open source projects built on top of Apache Ranger, Apache Atlas, etc. And prior to that, various roles in strategy, product management, etc., at various other companies such as Salesforce, Cisco WebEx, Proofpoint, Telefonica. Today, we are here to talk about your data lake journey and how we can secure that properly as you move your data from on-prem environments into multi-cloud and hybrid environments. There are characteristics of enterprises today.
Hi everyone. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak in front of you guys. I'm Akhil Murali. I'm the Director of Product here at Cubo. I'm responsible for driving the security and privacy of the platform. And given the day and age we are in, it's an important topic, and I'm fortunate that you guys are finding time to join us for this session. A little bit about myself. I've been doing product management for about 15 years. My career in product management around data security has kind of mirrored the journey and trends in the market. So it began with infrastructure-centric security, moving to perimeter-centric security, and finally into data-centric security and privacy. And I look forward to talking along with Srikanth some of the topics around data lake security with you guys today. For the next 10 minutes or so, I want to set the state of sensitive data security that's going on today, especially in this landscape. You continue to hear a lot of information about sensitive data, breaches, regulations, and privacy concerns. So I want to quickly run over the current state, and then I'll hand it over to Srikanth to kind of walk through his perspective from his standpoint as a vendor in this space. Let me ask one question to kind of tee the conversation. What do you think Marriott, Zoom, Magellan, and MGM Grand share? If you remember the news, in fact, I doubt you do, other than anything about COVID since March. But prior to that, these four companies were in the news for the wrong reasons. Obviously, Zoom IPO and so forth are positive news, but there was certainly some concerning news. And if you remember the topic you're going to talk about, you probably have guessed this right. Each of these companies went through data breaches, and the big reasons for them, all surround their ability to protect their data and resulting in hackers potentially attacking them. The key takeaway from this has been that it's not a question of if you will be breached; it's a question of when you will be breached. And if you look at Marriott as an example, just 2 years ago, there was a breach in Marriott that exposed over 500 million user records, and they still seem to be grappling with this challenge. So the challenge is, how do you look at a plan or addressing your concerns around data breaches? Because it is going to be an eventuality for most customers. The key thing is that there's a strong trend towards an escalation of data risks, and there are a lot of reasons why this is happening. One is certainly the data breaches. There's a lot of potential revenue opportunities from people like hackers stealing information and selling in the black market for cheap, but for being able to generate easy way to make money. Furthermore, there are lots of regulations coming in. The biggest challenge with these regulations are they're not all the same. While there are regulations from Europe, there are regulations in US, there are regulations in China, each of them have looked at it very differently. And the challenge is to make sense of these. China looks at state-centric regulations. How do they protect the state? In Europe, in GDPR, it's all about protecting the user, the EU citizen. It's all about the individual. In the US, it's all about market-centric. How do I make sure businesses can still succeed and offer competitive differentiation, but also being able to provide a level of privacy? The other big challenge is around proliferation. The big challenge with proliferation is that most companies depend on sharing data to make money, to be sustainable with their business models. And this requires data to be shared, not just within the confines of an environment that they control, but often with third party. You heard about Facebook needing to share data with Cambridge Analytica and then them sharing the data further. So proliferation is a big concern for most companies. And finally, you're creating these high value assets that are good targets. There's no longer a needle in the haystack to find sensitive data. With data lakes and architectures that's around providing centralized repositories for information, you're basically providing easy positions, easy locations for hackers to go and target. So this continuous trend in the escalation of data risk is making the life of your security overwhelmed. One of the biggest challenges is not about having a budget to go after security. The companies I mentioned earlier, like the Marriotts, the healthcare companies, often have a lot of budget to spend on security. The challenge is, how do they make the most of it? And there are key challenges both internally and externally that can result in challenges. I talked about some of the external factors like the business model where you need to share the data, but looking at internally, the security team have a big challenge to overcome to protect sensitive data. The first one is the lack of visibility and ownership. Oftentimes, you have to share data between different parts of your organization, and data gets siloed. And the ability to safeguard it is no longer possible by having data protection at the perimeter or at the infrastructure layer. The second is you have an inability to prioritize what you need to focus on. When you have data that's spread across your enterprise, across various silos, and you have a limited budget, how do you prioritize what you're going to go after? Where are you going to spend most of your time and effort on? And it's often a challenge, which is compounded by the fact that there is slow and inaccurate detection. The ability for you to know what's sensitive, what's not, and when incidents happen is often a challenge with the lack of appropriate technologies and tools available. And lastly, the type of protection themselves. Now, historically, as I talked about in my own experience, we build products that safeguard the perimeter where data is protected when data leaves an enterprise. But when there are compromised credentials, your bad actors are basically good actors whose credentials have been compromised. So there's a need to be able to have appropriate levels of protection on the data itself. People talk about data being the new oil. A lot of people, businesses are storing more and more data. Now the question is, how do you, ensure that that's data that you collect is appropriately safeguarded? The other big challenge, as I mentioned, is about ownership of the data. The challenge and the truth behind this is that there is no single owner. There are different owners for the data. On one end, you have security and privacy that are, that define your policies and rules about how data needs to be protected. On the other hand, there is IT and there is business that needs the data to be stored and be able to be made available to your business users to make the right decisions. At the end of the day, you're managing business risk. So security is no longer just about preventing data use by providing these strong safeguards, but being able to enable business value from the data while also safeguarding the risk associated with it. So security is largely tied to containing your risk while enabling your business users to get the most out of the data that they're collecting. And the true nature of security needs to take into account the requirements across these four different business owners that may have variable levels of ownership on the data. So given this, now I've talked about the problem statement. We talked about some of the key challenges. How do you look at a solution? What are the key things that people need to think about when tackling this challenges that people have around sensitive data risk? It's about addressing 4 steps of the process. Number one is you want to confirm what you know. You want to know that you may have some sensitive data in some environments, but you want to have visibility across your environments to know where your sensitive data resides so it can appropriately prioritize. Once you have that, you're able to detect what's the unexpected. So you're able to find the areas where you may have not known that you have sensitive data and you may be exposed. Then the action is about remediating risk. You want to be able to apply the right set of data controls. There is no silver bullet in data security, and you have to find the right set of controls that may make what makes sense for you for your specific use case so that the business can still realize the value behind the data. And this process doesn't end by set it and forget it, but rather this is a continuous process of managing your risk assessment. So you need to continuously track and monitor and be able to do all this at scale. We're talking about data volumes that are going to be far-reaching with a high degree of variety, velocity of data being produced. Now, people say that most of the data that's going to be available in 2025 have not even been produced yet. 80% of that probably is going to still be produced. Given that, it's really important that you have a continuous risk posture of assessing your risk and continuously managing and identifying solution. With that, I want to tee it off to Srikanth, who has kind of been dealing with this in his role at Privacera and previously at Cloudera, about how he thinks about and how he's approached tackling this with solutions from Privacera.
As Michael walked us through the evolution of security from a perimeter to a cloud-centric environment across enterprises. During the same journey, in parallel, the data lakes have evolved into their current shape and form from the very early beginnings in the 2000s, when Hadoop used to be the technology that used to drive these data lakes. From then on, we had challenges with security, and then in 2014, Apache Ranger was incubated as part of the security infrastructure to provide this centralized authorization and audits for this entire ecosystem. And by 2015, these workloads started moving to the cloud. So a lot of the data lake infrastructure also started moving along with it, as well as the compute that goes on top. And by 2017, most of the access control challenges were now with regards to the fragmented system that we have with multiple clouds and also hybrid and other form factors that most enterprises are dealing with. So your data moved, and your security also has to move now along with it to be able to secure it properly to address all of those challenges that Akhil walked us through. Just as a little tidbit here, looking ahead, in 2025, we expect almost 50% of the data is going to be in these public cloud environments. And with these environments come the challenges of the data location, as well as your ability to control, secure, and govern this data so that you can responsibly share this data and democratize this data so you can get the value out of this in these environments. So if you look at our current state of affairs, most large enterprises are in some way, shape, or form in a hybrid infrastructure. They've got some of the data in the public cloud, some on-prem within their data centers. They need precise control over the location of where the data is, depending on its sensitivity and other characteristics. They want to be able to customize and integrate this not only on your on-prem side, but they also want the flexibility that the cloud gives you in terms of agility and also the elasticity for being able to grow and shrink this footprint, and as your data needs grow and shrink. So in this space, Privacera is a company that was founded on the foundation of Apache Ranger. So we provide security and governance capabilities across multi-cloud and hybrid environments. And some of the use cases that we enable here would resonate with what Akhil had mentioned before in terms of the enterprise challenges. A lot of the customers that we find today, they are moving from mostly from Hadoop or big data type of environments into heterogeneous cloud infrastructures. You could be moving from your Cloudera or Hortonworks or MapR to AWS, Azure, GCP, or third-party services such as Kubeflow on top. And then the biggest challenge that you see is you want to be able to share this data, but provide the same envelope of controls that were possible with your enterprise data centers. And with the emerging regulations such as CCPA, GDPR, as well as industry-specific regulations, there is this tension between being able to comply with the responsible use of this data and at the same time share this responsibly across your enterprise to get the value by way of better insights and better value extraction of that data. Privacera, we are squarely focused on this problem, which is how do you enable a uniform data governance capability, data security, and privacy-related capabilities in a multi-cloud heterogeneous universe where you have multiple cloud services, multiple cloud providers, a variety of different formats of data, and data keeps moving back and forth between maybe your on-prem and cloud. You want to be able to provide precise, fine-grained access control. You want to be able to detect and figure out where your sensitive data is. You want to be able to monitor the usage of this data and be able to report on it for compliance and other purposes. So with this movement to cloud and this heterogeneous cloud environments, we see that every technology, every data service has its own way to manage these data services, the access control and auditing and other capabilities around authorization of that data. So as you see here, typical enterprise uses about 10 to 15 of these services today. It could be having stuff in Kubeflow as well as in AWS infrastructure or in Azure or Google or any combination thereof. So this the security picture here is sort of fragmented and piecemeal and optimized for a particular vendor's footprint and their capabilities around it. What this means is that you have now increased risk due to this heterogeneity and also the multiple locations that you have to deal with. And it becomes very difficult to maintain the privacy and govern this data suitably so that you are not in violation of any of the compliance issues, compliance regulations such as GDPR, CCPA, or other industry-specific regulations such as HIPAA. Without this common fabric or this common way to look at the risks and be able to protect against them, you cannot effectively do data democratization across this entire landscape. So you need the visibility, and you need to be able to provide that envelope of controls and other data protection schemes to be able to handle this data responsibly in these environments. So at Privacera here, we're focused on what we like to call this governance blind spot. Typically, if you look at an enterprise, you have folks who are responsible for determining and enforcing different data access policies. This could be everything from your governance teams to your security teams, as well as your privacy teams. Each of them have different notions of what what types of policies they want to apply against data. And all of these need to be implemented in different tooling and for different infrastructure so that your data consumers on the other end have full flexibility and control over what they want to see without running afoul of any of the industry-specific regulations or compliance mandates that that particular business may be operating in. So we kind of focused at this intersection of privacy, security, and governance and help you provide the controls that are needed to be able to responsibly democratize this data, share this data properly, and at the same time be in compliance with various regulations. So we view this as having this notion of balancing increasingly what is called the dual mandate for IT, which is you need to be able to literally overshare your data, but at the same time, you want to be able to not run afoul of any compliance regulations that data might be subject to. And we are at this intersection, and we help you balance that through our technologies. Okay, so what does Privacera provide? So we provide a single pane of glass for your security and governance needs, all the way from the upstream task of being able to detect and figure out where your sensitive data is. As Akhil mentioned earlier, being able to know what data you have and how much of that is sensitive and where it's located is the first step to providing any kind of protection or assurance downstream. So we help you first discover where this data is and classify it appropriately so that you can put the appropriate sharing and other controls on top. We provide centralized access control and fine-grained access control, fine-grained at the level of a table, column, database, or file, folder, object, etc., or bucket. So we, depending on the types of service, we can go as fine-grained as the service requires, as the data service requires. And then we provide also additionally compliance workflows to help manage the automated policy controls and enforcements around those. So we provide this efficient and automated data sharing, single pane of glass capabilities, and the ability to, as you're transforming this data, to secure and protect it appropriately as the data moves through this ecosystem or this landscape, the increasingly fragmented and heterogeneous landscape that you face with cloud solutions. Starting with the early part of this picture or the initial part of your pipeline, the first task is you first need to be able to understand where your data is at a glance, and then we provide a variety of techniques, including AI-based or AI-enabled techniques, to be able to precisely identify and classify sensitive data, and we provide this uniformly across multiple cloud services, across different geographies, and then you can now discover where all of this data is located, and then assess how it's currently protected and be able to add additional policy controls and data protection capabilities on top of the data to be able to responsibly use that data across different business units. We aim to provide automation of this process of detection and cataloging of this data, and then with a view to improving the analytic value and the insight extraction from that data landscape. So here's an example. So we have scanners that are part of the Privacera platform that do very precise detection using a variety of techniques, everything from pattern matching to machine learning-based models are available. And we also provide not only the detection capabilities, but the automation of these at scale using distributed technologies such as Spark to do this in a very flexible and scalable fashion across multiple cloud services. We also provide, as an outcome from this, human-in-the-loop workflows where you need to curate the classifications that are being automated and be able to determine whether those are false positives or not, and be able to take the appropriate remedial action where necessary. So it all starts with creating this inventory of sensitive data and classifying the data appropriately to be able to take downstream actions on it. So here's another view into this. This shows you, for example, the dashboard of where all your data is, what types of sensitive data exist, and where, and what types and how many have been unearthed in the past. Whatever this time window is. In this case, this is for in this particular infrastructure, you have multiple services and across the 3 cloud providers, and we've gone and scanned those, and we've shown you where all the sensitive data resides. Very easy to consume dashboard. Once you've discovered and inventoried this data, the next stage is about controlling access to those. And for that, we have extended Apache Ranger, which is the de facto standard in the Hadoop ecosystem, for authorization and auditing of data that exists within that infrastructure. We've extended that to cloud native services, and in particular with Cubo, with Hive and Presto, and Spark and other services. And we also do this natively for the other public cloud services in AWS, Azure, or Google. Centralized access controls provide you both role-based access control as well as attribute-based access control methods to write policies that can be done, that can be written at a very granular level to control access to different assets that you might have in the cloud. As an example here's a policy where you're looking at restricting access to some sales data, and you can write policies at a very precise table or column level, and you can control access both at the role level or at the user level, and also based on the properties or conditions of access, such as the validity period or other metadata properties that exist on the data itself. And then you can control permissions at a very highly selective level, and at a very precise level, and you can also delegate that administration across multiple actors within the enterprise. So this gives you sort of a very high-level picture in terms of being able to write these policies once in a central infrastructure, have that be locally enforced in each of the cloud environments, and be able to precisely enforce, detect, and monitor the usage of the data as this is being consumed by a variety of consumers within your enterprise. In addition to this, we also support various compliance-driven workflows. As an example, with GDPR and CCPA, there's this notion of right to erasure or right to be forgotten, and there's also right to access as well as consent management. So we have certain flows within our platform which enable you to do this at scale, to be able to detect where certain sensitive data might reside, and be able to selectively expunge that data on receiving requests from customers for that specific type of sensitive data to be removed or deleted from that entire infrastructure. So what this helps us do in the big picture is to apply these policies, compliance policies consistently, and also take any remedial actions such as data protection. So for example, we have capabilities to do format preserving encryption or very sophisticated types of masking within our infrastructure. So as you're building your data pipelines and part of your data engineering tasks, you will be able to incorporate these additional compliance workflows to be able to protect the data as it's landed or as it's being moved and consumed across this entire supply chain within the enterprise. So the value here is that we provide that single integrated system that can provide you these capabilities that will help you satisfy some of the requirements of GDPR, CCPA, etc. Do this in an automated fashion so that you can accelerate your migration to the cloud with the consistency of the policies that you're used to with your on-prem systems, and providing you that same envelope, that same sort of capabilities in a hybrid universe. In a nutshell, the Privacera platform provides you these 4 different areas of capabilities. One is around the automated data discovery to be able to precisely detect where the sensitive data is and classify it. Once you've classified it, using both the metadata as well as other location and resource properties, be able to control access to a very, very fine-grained level, supporting various compliance workflows, and then accelerating, in the process, accelerating the migration to the cloud for these customers. Overall, in your data lake journey, there are 4 areas where Privacera can help you. The first being the comprehensive sensitive data discovery. We can, using a variety of sophisticated techniques, help you understand the context of where your data is sitting and classify the data appropriately. And once you've done that, we also enable you to take action to be able to control access to the data from a single console, and be able to uniformly enforce this across cloud and on-premises data services without requiring any changes to your user behavior or additional layers such as virtualization or additional views. So we do this in situ natively with our enforcement points that are provided based on the Apache Ranger open source foundation. As a result of this, you get precise enforcement of your data security and privacy and governance policies. And we allow you to do this at a very fine-grained level, at an attribute level, at a role level, at a classification level, and down to the lowest level of granularity that a particular service allows. It could be a row or a column or a file or an object, for example, in that case of these heterogeneous data services. The overall picture here is that we simplify the ability of enterprises to be able to comply with some of these regulations, the privacy regulations, and at the same time be able to democratize this data and extract the value from your investments in these cloud platforms. We would welcome your comments and would definitely love to stay in touch. Please do share this session, and we will take a few questions here in the remaining time.